I could kiss you both.
He's coming. He's an engaged man.
Well, this has been a wonderful party. The party I've always wanted to throw my whole life. And thank you all for coming and being in this beautiful place together and being open and querying in a new kind of way. It's felt wonderful. My first, I have many thank yous and they sort of cascade, but my first thank you, of course, is to Wenda Bauschpies, who's been the tell you that I don't know if Joan of Arc's a good idea, but given current politics, but sort of the Joan of Arc of the last year for us working under incredible circumstances. We had 100% more applications for abstracts and papers than we've ever had. We've now surpassed HSS in numbers of people showing up at the annual meeting, etc. All of that has led to many, many sleepless nights for both of us. And in the end, we had to make some compromises. But I think, we're all good campers, and we've dealt with that as best as we can. So, Wenda, my dear friend,
thank you, and really my first thanks is to you, because I could not be a program chair without a community. And really, I think this is a co-creation, and I thank you. But you can clap yourself. But I have to do my official thanks. And I'm going to go in order of largesse in terms of institution. I thank Penn State University for continuing to employ me so I could be your program chair this last year. I thank RIT for supplying you with pens, that you noticed there were some free pens. So those are the institutional thanks. The program committee was absolutely wonderful. And I would like to thank my program committee. There was Deb Blizzard, Elizabeth Shea, Steve Sawyer, Stephen Walton, Sergio Sismondo, and Linda Lane were a spectacular program committee that stood behind me, and I thank them. And in addition, I created what I called the Hospitality Committee to help me address some of the little issues. And one of those little issues was the bag. And I have to thank Deborah Blizzard for doing a lot of hard work to get us a special bag, because it is our 30th year, after all. And also Leah McFarlane helped with that, and Patrick Fenn helped with the dining guides. I'd like to thank them as well. And once again, thank all of you.
Jeff accidentally gave me the
Okay. I got it. Okay.
Thanks again, Wenda.
Thank you.
It's time for me to thank outgoing members of, I almost said Congress, of Council. Wishful thinking. Anyway, Alondra Nelson, Anyor Berg, and Helen Barron and Gary Downey for the extended period of council service on the publication committee. I'd like to thank you very, very much. Some of the hardest invisible work, or partially invisible work, entailed in some of the committees are reading dozens and dozens of books for the Fleck and Carson Awards, and reading fewer dozens, but still many papers for the Mullins Award. And that deserves a special thanks, especially if you end up with this wonderful illusion that you've caught up. I was chair one year. It's like, now I know. 30 seconds later, the feeling had gone. But it's nice. I'd like to welcome new council members, Stefan Timmermans, Gabrielle Hecht, and Michelle Murphy. Will be serving us for the next 3 years. And Mike Lynch will begin his term as president-elect this year. This is the part of the celebration where we distribute the awards for the organization. And the first one, and conceivably the most important one, is the Nicholas Mullins Award, which was established to reward the best graduate student paper in its year. And Sergio Sismondo will be introducing that award.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Mullins Award Committee. I wasn't the chair. Roli Varma was the chair, but she had to fly out to India about half an hour ago, so taking her place. The committee read many excellent papers and wanted to award more than one prize, or at least wanted to recognize. In particular, I'll take an opportunity to put a plug in, mention Young Sung Kim's very fine paper being presented at this conference tomorrow, Impure Bioethics. In the end, though, one paper stood out. The prize will be awarded to Natasha Myers, a doctoral student at MIT, for her paper, Molecular Embodiments and the Bodywork of Modeling in Protein Crystallography. In her paper, Myers explores the physicality of the building and manipulation of molecular models. She combines beautiful discussions of the history of molecular graphics, but combines that with elegant ethnographic data to describe different ways that researchers feel their way around and inside molecules. Representation of molecules is a bodily skill that has crystallographers twisting and pushing to find shapes that work. The paper is forthcoming in Social Studies of Science, and I think that you will all enjoy and profit from reading it. Natasha Myers.
Advisors and the generous readers who helped make this paper.
I also must say that I went to the presentation that Natasha gave a couple of days ago, and it was the only time in my life I have ever entertained the notion of becoming a chemist. It's really alien to me, but it was so beautifully presented that I had that notion. Our next prize is the Rachel Carson Prize, awarded to those books that have a connection with ecology, with activism, with the kind of social justice program that was envisioned so long ago by Rachel Carson. And that will be presented by Jordan Berg.
The Rachel Carson Prize is awarded to a work of particular social or political relevance in the field of science and technology studies. Consequently, it is a reminder of the long history of political engagement within the 4S community. And it's also a reminder of its many contributions. STS at its best constantly points out that facts and artifacts could have been otherwise. I know many people think that could have been otherwise is a very naive expression. Still, I think it is a very good one, and it's a deeply political one. This year's winner takes this statement, "It could have been otherwise," into the field of brain research. In a challenging cross-disciplinary study of one particular visualizing technique called EET, a technique that produces various images of the brain. And constantly throughout this book, a question is asked: what is various types of brains? The book addresses how these brain images come to be taken as facts about the world and facts about various sorts of human beings, both within different kinds of sciences and in popular media. The form of the book is open. Open in the sense that it invites the reader to follow the STS researcher when exploring the various meaning-making processes involved in the production of brain images. It follows images in various locations and asks questions about how and why the brain has become such an important and contested arena for understanding personality. How is it we come to equate person with brain? The often colorful images represented in these pictures is a kind of sorting out and classification, not only of types of brains, but also of human beings. Some benefit from these images, others don't. The pictures are called on to provide answers to questions of utmost importance for the ways we live our daily lives. And this is the politics of the book. In this respect, it is a book very much in the tradition of Rachel Carson. So on behalf of this year's Rachel Carson Prize Committee, I'm pleased and honored to congratulate and announce Joe Dummett and his Picturing Personhood as this year's winner.
Very much. Feels.
I'm going to give this to you first. And I would also like to propose a toast. I was very quick. I was given 3 minutes, and it took only 2.5. So,
Drink up.
fill up your glasses. So this is a toast to Joe, and also to the continuous work and critical engagement with politics within 4S. Score.
No one told me how many minutes I should or shouldn't take, but I'll be quick, I hope. I just wanted to say, first, it feels lonely up here without images behind me. Thank you to the committee members, and especially to my committee members, especially Donna Haraway, who inspired a lot of the directions my work has gone and continues to go. And to all of my friends at MIT and to UC Davis, and I think contractually to the NSF. And deeply to the 4S community, which has been my home since graduate school, a place that I constantly find intellectual liveliness, sincere scholars, and especially friends. I'm honored and humbled to receive this prize, both for the great books that have received it before, and because Rachel Carson is an inspiration for her wonderful writing, her careful work, her committed research. I mentioned at my session today that my voice is one in which I try to talk to controversial topics so that no one who doesn't like each other doesn't leave the room. To find a way of describing social gridlock so that different groups recognize their role in perpetuating that gridlock, and in that way find some shared mode in which they might actually journey together to some other solution. But I also hope that my work lives up to Carson's very STS-like call to combat the assumption that, quote, knowledge of science is the prerogative of only a small number of human beings, isolated and priest-like in their laboratories. That is not true, she said. That cannot be true. Opening up the closed and increasingly privatized box of science and technology so that the connections in there become our connections, so that all of knowledge is a continual process, is a very STS-like activity. Brain images of the kind I've written about continue to show up in the news, before Congress, in courts, and in patient lives. And although I'm not sure I approve of the concept or the term neuroethics as a field of expertise, because it often functions as neuropublicity, that is posing questions like, once brain scans can tell lies from truths, will that be an invasion of privacy? Rather than asking how it is that we think images can show lies in the first place, and what we should do with both brain scans and lying. I nonetheless have attended neuroethics conferences recently and just joined a new society of neuroethics precisely in order to help broaden the meaning of ethics in STS-like ways. And this prize gives me encouragement to keep trying. Thank all of you again.
Our next prize is another book prize named after Ludwig Fleck, another refound and found again ancestor of our work here. The Fleck Prize is awarded for the best scholarly book produced by the STS community with a slightly different shading than the Carson book. In some ways, they're twins. I'll let Wendy Bausch please explain the rest of it. I don't take myself into too many distinctions, but I'm glad that we have both. And I think
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here in my second role this evening. And actually, if you have the pleasure of serving on council, you may not know what the distinction is. It's always a debate. What is the distinction? How do we sort out what should get the Carson and the Fleck? But meanwhile, I'm here this evening to announce the winner of the Ludwig Fleck Book Prize, given each year, as we mentioned, in the forest community for the best scholarly book published in the last 3 years. And you can imagine that's an enormous task. The committee, Yoko Fujiaki, Gary Downey, and myself, we spent good conversations negotiating, figuring out who and where should the honor of the Fleck Prize go. And in our discussions, ultimately, in the year that we did this last year, in our discussions, it came down to one book seemed to be the clear prize winner, and it was Philip Murawski's The Effortless Economy of Science, ? And I personally love the question mark. And the reason why we ultimately came to a very solid agreement on Philip Murawski's book was for its ability to engage multiple disciplines, to critique accepted truths, and to explore the socialness of science within the history of history and philosophy of economics. Thus, it was clearly an STS book. There was no question. This was a lovely STS book, but really what made it prize-worthy? That we need to go a little deeper, and for me, and I think Yoko and Gary would agree with me, it was his bravery to explore the in-between spaces of the science-economic nexus, to raise those questions that cause us to stop and think, to look at science as an economic phenomenon, and to seriously and solidly engage with the STS literature that is both refreshing, challenging, and possibly pushing us in new directions. Thus, the 2006 Ludwig Fleck Prize Committee is delighted to introduce you to the author of this wonderfully interdisciplinary selection of essays designed to help us think past the black box of money and policy. Past the black box of money and policy into a new understanding of the economy of science. And I would encourage you and invite you to join us early tomorrow morning for the Author Meets Critic, and to welcome Philip Morawski to accept the prize.
I'm glad Wenda said that thing about the question mark, because Wes Schrum told me that the question mark has been left out of all the other things. And then I thought everyone would think that I actually thought science was effortless or something like that. I was all worried about that. Anyway, just thanks a whole lot for a totally unexpected prize, because I talk about this in the book a little bit, the ways in which it's really hard to get STS to talk about what I think of as kind of more macro issues and sometimes more structural issues, especially with regard to what I see as one of the main things that's happening in our lifetime, the commercialization of science generally, and what that means for just about everything. And I don't feel like I've even begun to scratch the surface on top of it. I really, in a sense, apologize for the book, because it's a history of my struggling to try to figure out, why don't I like this idea of a marketplace of ideas, and what is really wrong with that in some way, and I think I know the answer now. The trouble is, it's not in the book, so but read it anyway, please. And in fact, Paul Foreman has a paper, a really long paper, coming out in History and Technology next year, where he argues that even the very idea of science itself is being dissolved under the new regime. And while I don't, agree with Paul all the way, I would think it would matter to a group like 4S that they are living through a period in which science may lose its specificity as part of becoming something else. And that's really something that I think this group is, particularly well suited to address. So anyway, thanks a lot.
Finally, it's my pleasure to come to the last presentation, the Bernal Prize, which is a kind of lifelong combination of service to the society, the community, of academic accomplishment and leadership, of moral leadership, and of someone that takes us in a new direction altogether. Now, we decided on this committee that since all of you are so wonderful, unique, and totally incomparable in a way, we decided to change to a simpler criteria. And we began to read the literature on how to tell things like who will be successful, who will have the most impact on the world, will birth order be important in affecting scientific revolutions. And we finally did find a criteria. We did this weighted by and adjusted for gender and ethnic averages, of course. And I speak, of course, of the issue of height. It's well known, one of the very few findings in social science, that height is a very good predictor, perhaps the best predictor of lifelong success. So we began to search. We searched high and low. We Gary Downey, Peter Taylor, I don't know if you call him an American, but Roddy Reed, there were quite a few we could consider and line up there. We went then over the pond to Europe and found a richer pool of candidates. We found Knut Sorensen, for example. It seemed the farther north we went, the better we were doing. Jan Havland is 6'8" and has great red hair. You may know, wonderful new scholar from Norway. Una Latour, Jane Somerton. We began to feel pretty satisfied with our pool of applicants, our grid. But someone was missing. We sort of kept looking around and thinking, who's the absolutely tallest that we can find in the Flores community? And I'll leave it to Mike Lynch to explain how we then conducted the search, having narrowed it to that one dimension.
I was not considered under that criteria. Now, I'm supposed to start by saying that it's a pleasure to announce the 2006 J.D. Burnell Prize winner. And it is indeed a pleasure because the committee, John Stodmeyer, Donald McKenzie, Bruna Latour, and Susan Lee Starr, chose a truly fine and worthy person as recipient. But I also dread making this announcement because I have trouble pronouncing the prize winner's name. Fortunately, he's Dutch, incredibly adept at speaking many languages fluently, but also tolerant of those of us who struggle to pronounce his native language and even to pronounce our own. He is, of course, professor and chair of the Department of Technology and Society Studies at the University of Maastricht, Wiebe Beeker. I learned while preparing this introduction that Beeker is Dutch for beekeeper. This is fitting for a past president of this association, who was an extremely effective and considerate leader of this hive, or is it a swarm? However, I always have pronounced his name Biker, like Hell's Angel. Now Wiebe is about as far from being a Hell's Angel as one can get. But I'm told that he rides the non-motorized kind of bike incessantly. Biker also calls to mind his essay with Trevor Pinch on the social construction of the safety bicycle, which Trevor never learned the lesson from, falling over the handlebars last year. An essay that launched the social construction of technology movement in the mid-1980s. A version of the essay was originally published in Social Studies of Science, got to do a plug, but it is perhaps most familiar as part of the volume edited by Biker, Hughes, and Pinch, which graces so many of our bookshelves. The one we name after another form of transportation, the school bus book, because of the orange cover. The social construction of technology was, of course, a highly significant move as it provided a provocative frame for building an alliance between science studies and another relevant social group, the history of technology. Trevor Pinch tells me that when SCOT, as it's often called, was launched at the first 20 workshop, Wiebe had the brilliant idea of holding it in an isolated spot where the only form of transport was rental bicycles. So all participants went on bike rides together, and this really added to the ambiance. Although the bicycle is a constant theme in Wiebe's life, he went on to develop and elaborate his own ideas about technological frames in his 1995 MIT Press book of bicycles, Bakelite, and bulbs. And for a number of years now, Wiebe has been writing and acting to advocate the democratization of technology. For example, with Karen Bisterveld,
He published a paper in Technology and Culture, Women Walking Through Plans, Technology, Democracy, and Gender Identity, which received the Abbott, Pace, and Usher Prize in 2002 for the best scholarly work published during the preceding 3 years under the auspices of the Society for the History of Technology. He also has engaged himself in efforts to bring about changes in situations he studies, for example, ecological restoration projects. Recently, Wiebe has been studying a topic that is very close to home for the Dutch, water engineering. It is especially close to home for him because his father, Eco Wiebe Bijker, was a coastal engineer, and needless to say, the name Eco fits Wiebe the Younger also very well. According to an essay about the Hurricane Katrina disaster that Wiebe presented in these meetings a year ago, which will be published in a few months in Social Studies of Science, he discovered during his research that his father had won an award from a coastal engineering society, and the paper actually explicates a paper by his father. There's much more to say about Wiebe's many academic, administrative, and political achievements, but I'm under orders to keep this short. Tall, I mean. One thing I feel compelled to mention is that before pursuing the sociology of technology, Wiebe wrote an award-winning series of physics textbooks, which included some discussion of science and society issues, and represented the sort of public outreach that he's maintained throughout his career. And finally, it is imperative that I say something about what a fine person Wiebe is. Anyone knows Wiebe can tell you that he has the gift of humility, genuine humility, and not false modesty. And while he is politically active, he is gentle, soft-spoken, tolerant, and considerate of others' viewpoints, which makes him that much more effective politically. It truly is, it truly is a pleasure to present this society's highest award to such a person, Wiebe Bijker.
When Mike called me to tell this news, I basically couldn't believe it. Rule 1 for writing acceptance speeches: never question the jury's decision. As sociologists, we know how important rituals are. They maintain institutions, they reproduce institutions. As sociologists of science, we have studied the unwritten rules of writing prize acceptance speeches. So after Mike's confirmation by email, I felt elated, thrilled, with a gratefulness that was very much amplified by a strong feeling of not deserving this. Rule 2. Do not be overly modest or overly grateful as if you don't deserve it, because that undermines the status of the prize and thereby its awarding institutions. So I'm bound to a balancing act, to accept gratefully without too much modesty, and at the same time remind all of you, as Mike very gracefully also did, that without having met Trevor in 1983, I simply wouldn't have been here. Rule 3, don't start mentioning names of friends, or you will be in trouble because you're forgetting someone. There are so many colleagues, some of them now personal friends, without whom I would not have been standing here. In France, in Britain, in those old days they were still talking to each other. In the US, in Scandinavia. Rule 4, honor the awarding institutions. Many of these colleagues are included in this society. 4S has been very generous and welcoming to me. The society's members are perhaps a rather unruly lot, but they are also risk-taking, innovative, very open, welcoming. That is why I suppose technology got a place on the agenda in the first place. And it's interesting that to 4S did not happen what happened to HSS, where the people that created SHOT simply felt that they had to pull out because there was no place for an attention to technology. The fact that there is now so much attention to technology is, I think, testifies for the openness and the welcoming character of 4S. Specifically, the openness to PhD students, the younger generation. If you look around in this conference, then I think you're very happy that there is lack of space and there is lack of coffee space because of this openness of. This is not my handwriting. This is my partner who slipped this in. She says, Rule X, don't go on about this young generation except that you're an old guy. Rule 5, that's mine again, try to say something substantive. 4S not only supported and facilitated innovative and risk-taking scholarship, but its members have also engaged with the outside world in a variety of ways. In that sense, the icons of Ludwig Fleck and Rachel Carsons very nicely capture the breadth and the agenda and the energy of the society. 4S has been expanding in various forms of outreach, geographically to South and East Asia, Latin America increasingly. We try very hard to Africa, Eastern Europe. Secondly, in terms of engagement, intervention, participation in the world, technology assessment, nanotechnology, rebuilding New Orleans by some individuals in this room, from an STS perspective, helping and contributing, research in technology for development, and finally also institutionally. 4S was recognized by the United Nations as officially as a civil society organization, which is after Council decided that we would apply for that, which really shows that 4S has a sort of explicit and now institutional agenda to engage in the world. STS has accomplished high quality scholarship, but also now created such a strong identity, I think, that we should move out into the world. We should try to participate, try to make a difference. That's also not my handwriting. Maybe my graduate students. Speak for yourself. Don't use the plural we. Rule 6. Make 7 rules. Rule 7. Don't take too long. I conclude by thanking very sincerely this society and its members for both the challenges and the opportunities that I received, for also being an intellectual outpost to go out in the world, and finally for awarding me the Bernal Prize. Thank you.
Bring the ceremony to an end in a moment. I just have a couple of things. One is a plea for people who will volunteer to be program chair next year. It should be an exciting year full of opportunities to put suggestions and new structures into place. And I have a 24/7 emergency phone line set up to my bedroom if there's any problem. The second thing is that there is now a call out for papers for the new editor of Science, Technology, and Human Values that will be open for, I guess, I don't know how to say bidding. It will be open, all bids can go to my bank account until January 15th. So if you have any inclination in that direction, please move on it fairly quickly. And finally, and also the presidential plenary session, which this was not, is tomorrow from 8 to 10 p.m., followed by a huge party. The graduate students are throwing. I don't know if we're allowed. Finally, please come to Montreal next year.